You are listening to episode 125 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness researchers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Cynthia Osterman joins us to speak about mindful self-compassion for teens in the state of Washington with the Benji Project. If you're listening to this podcast and find value and insights from what is shared here, know that this is made possible from your generosity and the generosity of others like you. I want to thank those of you who are making monthly donations to keep this podcast going. And if you're not yet, please take a moment, go to presentmomentmindfulness.com and click on Make a Donation. One-time or especially monthly donations show you value this work, which can't happen without you. Thank you for your help, your support, and your kind generosity. Growing up in contemporary society is incredibly difficult, so much harder than it was for people of my age when we were teens. Sure, it was difficult then, and depression and anxiety were sadly very common, but that pales in comparison to the environment of school shootings, cyberbullying, and even the fate of the planet's ecosystem landing on the shoulders of youth today. For some, this becomes overwhelming, and mindfulness may be a way to stem that tide. Cynthia Osterman is a lover of words, people, and places. Her spiritual path is Buddhism, and her professional path is journalism. She's had assignments in Chicago, Washington, D.C., London, Amsterdam, Paris, and Vancouver, as well as a stint as a humanitarian relief volunteer in East Africa. She's worked from home as an editor since moving to Port Townsend in 2000. Our guest today is Cynthia Osterman. Cynthia, nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start by just having you tell us about your background.
Yeah, so my professional background is as a journalist. I've worked for more than 30 years as a reporter and editor. And my background in mindfulness is as a Vipassana meditator. I took my first 10-day course in 1995 and have continued to practice. It feels like I'm a constant beginner, but it's really transformed my life and shaped the way I approach everything and given so much richness and depth to everything I do and my relationships, and so grateful for that gift in my life.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And I want to share that this is about something called the Benji Project, and there is a story about how this began that's deeply personal. So I wanted to ask if you're willing to just tell about that and what led to the creation of the Benji Project.
Yeah. So the Benji Project is named for my son. His name was Benji. He died by suicide in 2015, May 7th, 2015, and he was 15 years old at the time. And of course, as any parent would experience, this was really devastating. He didn't have a history of trouble or problems or diagnosed mental illness. He was just such a beautiful boy and very creative and funny and articulate. He was active in theater and sort of very, I want to say, sort of advanced beyond his years in many ways. He had friends of all different ages and was very sort of accomplished in terms of the projects he took on. He helped produce theater, and he started when he was 11. He started a book blog that got thousands of followers, but clearly on the inside he was really suffering, and that hit me so hard. I felt so strongly guilt and self-judgment about not being aware of the depth of his suffering, and his suicide came. He had struggles, that we thought were sort of typical teenage struggles, and those, things seemed within that context sort of normal adolescence, and his suicide for us came without warning. I've subsequently learned that most people, or the majority of people who die by suicide, are experiencing depression, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed. So that was probably a factor that we had missed. Another thing that was really made a big impact on me as I did more learning was how impulsive the teenage brain is. Biologically, it's a thought of a moment could determine an outcome that may not have been what he intended. A bad day, and he acted upon it. Well, I'll never know. But that period immediately after his death was, it was really just a blur for me, just barely hanging on and trying to, I have a younger child, and just trying to stay in the game for him. My meditation background, I think, was incredibly helpful during that time, just, to remember to keep breathing and just try to stay present through that. Really so incredibly difficult. I just have very few clear memories of that time. But after, 9 months to a year, I really started to investigate, felt very curious to understand more why I hadn't spotted, that kind of trouble was looming for Benji. I became sort of a detective in my own life. I had a forensic analysis done on his computer, which really didn't turn up anything. I talked to his friends. I learned some things, but nothing. There was no sort of single thing, nothing that I could really point my finger to. And, kind of analyzed everything that had happened in his childhood. He had been always a very sensitive, super smart kid, sort of quirky. And I thought a lot about, all of the things I had done as a mother. And he was such a loved child. Just, everyone in our family, his father, extended family, his brother, he was so deeply loved. And I tried to understand how, why he hadn't come to me for help, or come to anyone for help, and why he was such a mystery to me. He was a person who came out of my own body and who I felt I knew intimately, and to have such despair kind of hiding beneath the surface was shocking. And it also caused me to feel that, even though I thought I had been making this really great effort as a mother, I clearly failed. And that was just, I generated a lot of suffering over, feeling my shortcomings so acutely.
Cynthia, I wonder if we might pause for a moment on that. And thank you so much for this candid sharing. I'm sure anyone listening who has a child right now who may be struggling or has struggled themselves or has in some way been touched by suicide is feeling quite strongly, as I am, your words and this experience. And it sounds like you went through some analysis and you did some digging and perhaps some introspection. And I'm wondering if you might share a few things that you learned that might have been surprising or unexpected as you did that exploration.
Yeah, I think that we'll just, maybe briefly segueing on the grief process. I think that mindfulness is a great preparation for all the challenges of life, and really a great preparation, even though we don't know we're preparing. We never know what's coming around the corner, but it prepares us for both joy and pain. And, just that being in that space was very helpful. I think, the things I learned are that everyone is on their own arc in life. And, my process was my process, and everyone will be an individual. I did many different things. I had, great friends who sat with me. I had, my dog was a really great healer for me. I did counseling and therapy. I think the thing that really helped me turn the corner the most was, it was funny because it was both opened my eyes towards what Benji might have been experiencing, and it also helped me sort of accept and forgive myself and move on and direct my love to him in what felt like a more positive way. And that was, I really pondered how, what the barrier was for him to bring his troubles to me. And what I realized was that I think it's common for all of us, but more so for adolescents today, this feeling that everyone else has everything figured out. That there's social media images constantly bombarding all of us, but for teens who have that, whose brains and life maturity isn't there yet, in terms of, being fully developed, I think they make such an impact and create those walls, that everyone else is perfect. Nobody struggles like I do. And for someone like Benji, who was maybe, more sensitive than the average kid or more fragile than the average kid, I think he struggled with that piece, feeling that he was alone with his challenges. And, we've all had that experience, that no one else is going through what I'm going through. And to me, the process became that if he couldn't accept himself, his own, what he perceived as his own shortcomings, then he wasn't going to be able to communicate about that to anyone else. He couldn't say, I'm struggling, I need help, because he felt that was unacceptable. We live in a society where perfection is, considered attainable by everyone. You can have some cosmetic surgery or go get take a class or fake it or whatever. And I really wanted to understand why self-acceptance was so hard. And it it circled back for me to, you know, what we experience in our meditation, which is just being present with whatever truly is and accepting who we really are in that moment. And I felt very strongly that I wanted to do something about this issue. And I started talking to different wise people, including the person who ran our local mental health agency, who told me about some amazing research that was being done on mindful self-compassion. And, you know, I had been well steeped in mindfulness, but the self-compassion piece was really new for me as a sort of separate and more formalized kind of, you know, area of investigation. And I was really, really impressed by, you know, some very well done studies on how it improved, you know, emotional resilience and, you know, stress and anxiety. But mostly I was looking for something that would help us, help our community, help teens, help myself be willing to put that mask down. I mean, to show our vulnerabilities to one another. I think, you know, the Buddhist path can sometimes feel like a lonely one because we're the only ones who can do that work for ourselves. And it's, you know, a path of lifetimes. But I think we can all be here for each other and support each other, you know, whether, you know, you're on the Buddhist path or you're just a fellow traveler in life. You know, I don't feel that you need to be a meditator to benefit from this. And I wanted to start understanding how mindfulness and self-compassion could be offered to teens. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that does. So it sounds like we're on the trajectory of, how did the Benji project itself formulate?
Yeah. So that was sort of the question I started with, is that how can we make it easier for teens to talk about their struggles and to accept that struggling is normal and that it's, you know, it's never the end, you know, it's, things will get better, things will get worse, you know, but nothing is in and of itself unconquerable. And, you know, I think Benji knew that he was loved. I mean, the very last conversation I had with him, I hugged him and told him I loved him. I mean, I didn't know what was coming, but I feel so fortunate that that was the last moment I had with him. And I think that it wasn't enough, not that I wasn't enough as a parent, but it didn't penetrate for him because, you know, the messages he told himself were stronger. And, you know, maybe, you know, certainly mental illness can be a factor in suicide. You know, we never had any indication of something like that for him, but in the literature on suicide, there's sort of, you know, a phenomenon where basically, you know, the person gets almost like tunnel vision and nothing can really, you know, nothing offers a ray of hope for them, or, you know, can be quite hard for anyone to break through that. So, you know, my goal came to be finding a way to offer teens mindful self-compassion and not just for suicide prevention, but you know, these are life skills that we all need. You know, it's, you know, high functioning people need them, you know, suffer just as much as people who are struggling in life. It's sort of like good sense, you know, carrying an umbrella on a rainy day, you know, or on a day where the weather forecast is uncertain, and that's life. Life has an uncertain weather forecast for sure. So, you know, I didn't want it to be just a suicide prevention or intervention. I wanted it to be available for all kids in our community. And I should talk a little bit about where we live. We live on the Olympic Peninsula west of Seattle in the Puget Sound area. And we're far enough from Seattle that we aren't really part of the boom that Seattle experiences. We live in a really beautiful community, lots of natural beauty and lots of arts and culture, but it's economically very polarized. We've got a lot of rural poverty here, very under-resourced, of really aging population. And as I dug further into this, I was really amazed at some of the statistics I found. Our state does a survey of youth, surveys the same youth every 2 years as they go through middle school and high school. And our most recent Healthy Youth survey in 2016 found that 23% of our 10th graders had attempted suicide. This is self-reported. And 27% said they had seriously considered suicide. And among girls, it was even more shocking. 30% said they had attempted suicide. So, you know, and 41% said they had high levels of anxiety over the prior 2 weeks. So clearly there's a deep need here for something that, you know, is lacking in the toolkit.
Mm-hmm. So how does the Benji Project answer that? What did you end up with as that offering?
Yeah, so when I heard about mindful self-compassion, I started reading and learning about the work that Kristen Neff and Chris Germer had done, and thought to myself, God, it would be so great if someone had adapted this program for teenagers. You know, teenagers are so different. And so I Googled mindful self-compassion for teens, and I got to mindfulselfcompassionforteens.com, which was the very thing I was searching for, which is the adaptation of the original 8-week curriculum for adolescents that was done by Lorraine Hobbs and Karen Bluth. And, you know, I have no background in nonprofits. So I started this effort in late 2016 by doing a garage sale and raising money to start the organization. And in spring 2017, we did our first program, which was a core skills, mindful self-compassion weekend workshop for adults, really just trying to kind of seed the community. We're lucky that we live in a community that's, you know, progressive and has lots of, you know, there's a strong tradition of seekers here, you know, so there's lots of people who have mindfulness backgrounds, but the specific mindful self-compassion awareness wasn't really there. And so we got a lot of, you know, ordinary people, but also therapists and healthcare workers, some social worker from our domestic violence shelter, school counselors, you know, people who I hoped would be good advocates for developing this program. I mean, it was they were all self-selected, but it was a really great group of people. And Lorraine and Tim Burnett from Mindfulness Northwest taught that class, and the feedback was really great. They also did a talk for parents, and sort of just an open community event talking about, you know, the brain research and, you know, our natural bias towards the negative and, you know, all the great background that makes this so persuasive. And I also had a lot of help from Steve Hickman at University of California, San Diego, who gave me the idea of, instead of trying to launch right into doing a teen program, to sort of, you know, build the base that way. And so after that, later in 2017, we did a workshop for adults who work with teens, kind of giving them the experience of what the teen program, which is called Making Friends with Yourself, what that's like, you know, what the different components of it are. And we had a great turnout for that. And then we we did that. That was taught by Lorraine and Karen as well. And that weekend we did a half-day workshop for teens, and I think we had something like 25 kids in that. From the curriculum is for ages 11 to 19, and we really had kids that spanned that whole range and all different kinds of life experiences, which gave us some great information about how best to run classes in the future. We realized that kids across that age span are going through very different things, and older teens felt somewhat inhibited about talking about their experiences with kids as young as 11. So we've subsequently learned to divide kids up into smaller age groups, and we've mostly done single gender programs since then, since that's seemed to be another complicating factor. But without going into too much detail on all the organizational development, in 2018 we got a really great grant from our Fund for Women and Girls, and we ran our first 2 sessions of the full 8-week program. And our board has kind of formalized, and we've gotten some more institutional financial support. And in June, we did a 4-day camp for girls 11 to 14 using the Making Friends with Yourself curriculum, and we had 27 participants in that. And so we're in a town of under 10,000 people, so it seems to have really struck a chord, really resonating with our community, and I'm really excited about how it's going. Lots of challenges, but very rewarding.
Great. So what are some of the things, you mentioned a few of them already, about what you've learned, like having kids grouped a little more closely by age range, by gender, that there can be some issues there at that age. What are some of the other things that you've learned that may have been a bit surprising as you were developing this program and offering it? What have been some of the results as well?
Yeah, so the results are really, I'm really pleased with the results. Most kids do not want to take this program. They're usually signed up by an adult. We have some kids who've been referred by, we have a juvenile justice diversion program here that's sort of a support program for kids who are heading towards getting into trouble with the law. And we've had a few kids referred through that channel. And they're, pretty much compelled to take it. But the feedback once kids go through it is overwhelmingly positive. We've had, we do surveys at the end of the program, and upwards of 90% say they were happy they took the class. They felt they got something useful out of it, something that they could apply to the challenges of their daily life. We had for the class that was funded by the Fund for Women and Girls, which was taught by 2 really great supporters of our program, Rory Silberstein and Teresa from Mindfulness Northwest. They did a little bit more formal survey, and there was, with a measuring before after in terms of stress and depression, and there was a definite, marked decline there from week 1 to week 8. So, so we've had, very good results, and I feel that, as a mom, results of a program like this are not just what's in the moment. Kids may, my other child took the class, was one of the kids who did the class earlier this year, and the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. It was terrible. How could you make us do this? But I feel that it's the idea is planting seeds. If the kids come away with 1 or 2 tools or exercises or meditations that stick with them, that they can call upon at some point in the future, may not seem relevant now because they're not dealing with a challenge where it might be helpful, but that day will come. Everyone has cloudy days in their life. And so I feel that it's sort of like doing a fire drill. It's boring and seems irrelevant, but the day when you're in a fire, you're probably glad that you did that fire drill. So I just think it's good common sense, and even when kids seem cool to it, I feel we're doing something beneficial. In terms of the other, sort of surprising things, we might be a little bit of a unique circumstance here in our community because we are so small, and all the kids pretty much have known each other for years and years, if not since infancy. So sometimes it can make, it creates a bit of a two-sided coin. On the one hand, I think the community building that happens in the class might be easier because there is that familiarity, but it might also make it harder for some kids to open up because they feel sort of under more scrutiny because they're going to see everyone that is in that class with them, the next day in school or 2 days later in soccer practice. So that's something that we have noticed and given thought to. And the gender issue continues to be on my mind. Our girls programs have definitely been more successful in terms of numbers and also sort of enthusiasm, or sort of that degree to which at the end the participants say, wow, that was really helpful to me. And I think it has a lot to do with how boys are acculturated in our society, that willingness to talk and be in touch with feelings. And, because this all started because of a boy, it's really important to me to reach boys. And right now we're giving thought. I've been talking to Karen and Lorraine and other people who are involved with this program about how we can make our approach to boys resonate more, and that's something we'll be giving thought to. I think that I'm not going to interview the interviewer, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how we can communicate more strongly to boys.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. As you were speaking, I was thinking about the differences that I have seen just in growing up, as I'm sure you have, between boys and girls in this society, at least in North America, that there are difficulties for boys speaking about feelings, and especially in those kinds that show what might be determined to be, I think, falsely as weakness, and that is seen as such and therefore to be avoided, and that cultural pressure overrides even bare safety issues and concerns.
Yeah.
And so I completely agree with you on that, and my own thoughts. And of course, other listeners, please do make sure I'll have contact information for Cynthia available here. But my own thoughts is how is taking advantage of what those cultural norms and pressures are, and having that influence how the program itself is formed. So things like having male teachers for the boys' programs, having the opportunity for them to share and see quite sincerely and openly how this may have affected the teachers themselves in their own experiences. I'm recalling my friend Sam Himmelstein, who's been on this podcast a few times, and his work with at-risk youth, and just the real strong need for open sincerity and honesty, authenticity in how one's approach is, and having that direct contact with establishing that relationship with other participants in the program and the teacher as not the person who's going to be dictating here's how it is, but sharing in an exploration, and a hard one too, and capitalizing on and being able to meet that challenge, that is a strength, and seeing it as such. And that's a reframing that can be very nuanced and challenging. And certainly I'm no expert in this, so I am eager to hear more from what the listeners might have to offer on this.
Yeah. I think you've hit on some really important things. I think that definitely from what we see in boys in this age range are still more kinetic learners, like, having more physical activity would be helpful. And, talking about how these skills can support them in fulfilling their own ideas of what it's like what is male. It's not that we need to, transform them into, let's sit around
Anything
and
they're
chat.
not. Yeah.
Right. Let's just chat about our feelings. And, I think that there's a lot of resistance there. And a really important piece of this is just meeting the kids where they are. And I think if we can get past that initial hurdle, you touched on having male teachers, and the whole teacher piece has been challenging for us because we are fairly remote, and so far all of our programs have been taught by teachers who come from quite a distance. I mean, Kieran and Lorraine are flying on airplanes. Rory and Teresa were, driving quite a distance once a week. So the Benji project this past spring went through a process to select 2 people to receive scholarships to train to teach Making Friends with Yourselves. And we have 2 local people in our community who are now starting that process. Really impressive people, but we had not a single male apply, despite my beating the bushes. So we've got 2 great women, but it's still that challenge still remains. I think, it's not impossible. I mean, Rory, who's a man, has taught girls in our classes, and it's been very successful. But I do think it would help to for the kids to see a male who models both attributes, whatever being male means, but also being present and kind to oneself, and all of the skills that we're trying to offer.
Cynthia, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners today?
No, just I would say just generally, we don't see this program as a mental health intervention, or it's not therapy, but it kind of falls in that direction. And I think as a society, we really need to do more for teens. It seems in my research, I found a lot more programs and resources for younger kids. And of course, there's quite a bit for adults, but I think we all know that from our own experience that being an adolescent, it's one of the hardest times in life. And it seems that maybe because teens could be so obnoxious that there isn't a ton of resources out there. Yeah, there's resources or programs aimed at kids who are in trouble, but I'd love to catch kids, at the beginning of that continuum before things go off the rails for them. And so we just love for people to think about ways that, in our communities and as our society as a whole, and definitely in terms of how we spend our money, our government budgets, to see a little bit more of that directed towards teens.
Thank you. So for those who are interested in finding out more, and I'll be linking to this on the episode page for this episode, go to thebenjiproject.org. And our guest today is Cynthia Osterman. Cynthia, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate you sharing this work with us today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.